Welcome to the first of our special podcast, video podcasts, as part of our It's Time to ReWild Yourself campaign. We've got 5 of these, one each month between June and October, each of them with a different theme, looking at a different one of the 5 pathways to nature connection, which we'll speak about later. And I'm delighted to say that this month, for this episode, for our beauty episode, I'm joined by these beautiful people. I'm joined by Sarah Witts, Rachel Bigsby, and Luke Massey, and I'll get them to introduce themselves. Thanks so much for joining us. Sarah, should we start with you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about what it is you do as a nature practitioner and eco psychologist, and also tell us something that you find particularly beautiful in nature?
Great, thank you. Yeah, hi everyone, really lovely to be here. So yeah, my name's Sarah Witts. I'm one of the founders of Nature Connects CIC, which is a health and wellbeing service for the wellbeing of people and planet. So recognising that we are nature, and basically supporting people to manage and improve their own wellbeing and the wellbeing of the natural world by connecting to it more deeply, which I'm sure we will cover in more detail. And for me, I mean, that's a difficult question. I think for me, I find beauty in most things that I look at in nature, but I would say particularly at the moment it's the Cornish hedgerows that are just bursting with colour, the pinks of the foxgloves and the yellow of the buttercups and the gorse, so just really with that at the moment.
Is that where you are, Sarah? Whereabout are you?
Yeah, I'm in Cornwall in the UK.
Lovely. Great time of year to be there. Okay, hard to disagree with that. And Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. Rachel, as a wildlife photographer, you must see beautiful things in nature all the time. You can tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do, and again, something that particularly catches your eye when it happens about.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And you are right. I do see absolutely beautiful things all the time. There's nothing at all that I take for granted. And I think one of the real gifts of being a wildlife photographer is that you understand that nothing's permanent and you really do make the most of those fleeting encounters that you get with nature. So I focus my work on the natural artistry, specialising in seabird photography, of which we are so fortunate to have many in the UK where I'm based. What I love to do is try and capture some different images of wildlife that perhaps get people to stop and look at maybe some overlooked species in a unique way. I mean, everyone knows what a puffin is, but not as many people know what a guillemot or a razorbill is. And while they're all sat on the same ledge together, people are so keen to flock to the puffins and make a fuss and coo over them and overlook these other species. So it's kind of my mission to photograph these overlooked species in a way that gets people to stop. And with that in mind, I think one of the most beautiful things I find in nature, and it's certainly a sight that I really enjoy on a winter's day, is when it's a bit stormy and the sky is really dark, but you've got that tiny bit of sun coming through, and just in a tiny little dot in the distance you've got gannets flying over the horizon, and because of the black on their wingtips and the white on their back, they sort of sparkle and they look like little flashing little fairy lights in the distance, and that's always something that I really like seeing on a winter's day at the beach.
Oh, and beautiful description as well. Okay, and Luke, you are similar to Rachel. Have a history as a wildlife photographer, also a cameraman, and taking people as a guide out into all sorts of places. Currently, the rugged mountains of northern Spain. Tell us a bit more about what you do, and again, something that you find particularly in nature.
Yeah, I mean, my work's changed a lot over the last, I guess, 10 years or so. Well, a bit less than that now. My son's just turned 5. Since kids, basically, I'm not traveling as much, so I'm more home-based after spending probably 10 years traveling all around the world. And yeah, seeing lots of beautiful things, but also some not so beautiful things in terms of like persecution. I worked a lot on illegal wildlife trade and bird crime and things like that. But more beautiful. Well, now I'm doing a rewilding project here in Asturias, which I'm documenting as well, but kind of my time is taken up solely pretty much just managing all of that, which means photography and filming takes a back foot. But yeah, and in terms of beauty, it's really hard to choose one thing. But for me, again, this time of year, it's kind of coming to an end now, but bird migration, for me, I think the beauty of that is a huge very beautiful thing, but it always astounds me. It's always the kind of hook that I use with people that say birds are boring as well, is that you have these birds from as small as a goldcrest to, a griffon vulture, but they take these incredible journeys, which is impressive. And seeing it with your very own eyes, I've seen it from small birds in Estonia heading out over the Baltic to the Straits of Gibraltar. It's a beautiful sight when you get birds en masse, all kind of on a mission, just kind of tunnel vision, getting to go for their winter holidays or summer holidays.
That's a great point. And the more you know about the species as well and what they're up to, the more beautiful sometimes those encounters are. Like, we've got some, I wasn't going to do this, but my little beautiful moment, we've got some sand martins that come to nest in the sandbank on the River Usk. And just they're beautiful to watch. But when you know where they've come from, and the journey that they've made as well, that makes it.
No, definitely. And the species they've crossed paths with as well.
Yeah, stories they can tell. Well, they probably do tell, but we just
all chattering in the burrows.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, thanks, guys. Well, I should probably introduce a little bit more. I'm going to share some images as well on the screen, a little bit more about Voice for Nature's project, which is as part of ReWild Yourself, which is the initiative. It's the project that the campaign that we're running at the moment is called "It's Time to ReWild Yourself." And we should probably talk a little bit more about what it's about. The whole idea of it is basically trying to promote this idea of nature connection and improving our relationship to the natural world. But we should probably start there. And Sarah, this is something that you spend an awful lot of time doing, done a lot of training and work. Are you able to sort of, sounds quite woolly, nature connection? What exactly do we mean when we talk about nature connection?
Thank you. Yeah, I think for many people, actually, they think that our connection to nature is just about spending time in the outdoors, whatever that might look like. And the reality is we are facing, as humans are facing multiple crises, the natural world is facing multiple crises, and the kind of root cause of that is this disconnection to the natural world. So, from our evolutionary point of view, we've spent less than 1% of our time kind of living this way, this kind of modern, fast-paced culture. And actually we are kind of more disposed to, being in natural environments and being having social connections. So nature connection is about what we do when we're in nature, so when we're outdoors. And I would say as a starting point, it's about learning to stop and pay attention. And that allows us to come out of kind of busy minds and stress and actually be more in the present moment. We know it has lots of kind of impacts for human well-being, but we also know that by doing that, obviously we build and create and deepen our relationship, which creates more care for the natural world. So it also has this kind of reciprocal impact of improving the well-being of the natural world. So it's about recognizing, as I said in my intro, we are nature, we're not separate. And that's something that many of us, don't connect with that as a kind of, as a fact, really. So yeah, everything that we do is about improving that relationship. Just to kind of clarify, I'm training in eco-psychology, so I can't say I'm an eco-psychologist at this point. I'm a nature and health and well-being facilitator. And as I said, what I do when I'm with people is empower them and support them to learn practices to support their well-being. And often that is, like I say, short moments of helping people connect. Because often when people recognise they might want to shift their relationship, many of us spend lots of time in nature, but actually, if we're walking the dog, we're on our phone, we're feeling really, really stressed. Actually, it doesn't really matter what environment we're in. So sometimes people don't really know what to do when they're in nature without those distractions. So what we do is teach sensory-based practices and routines that people can build into their lives to just deepen this connection and build this relationship.
Interesting. I think that what you sort of said there or alluded to this, that it's not just contact in nature, it's actually how you feel about it. That's sort of magic. A lot of us don't do that extra bit, and sometimes I've been for a walk and I've spent the whole time listening to podcasts, which is okay, but that's another barrier, isn't it? Does that, Luke and Rachel, does does that resonate with you in terms of your idea of nature connection? And it'd be interesting to know personally, why it's important to you, or how that your own relationship with nature has been helpful for you.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I mean, I've the classic cliche line. I've always been into nature and wildlife, and from day dot. So for me, it's kind of not abnormal, so to speak. But most of my peers, I'd say, especially I didn't really hide it at school. People knew I'd be going to nature reserve and stuff, but a lot of my peers weren't into it at all. And I think with that, there was no real care about it, so to speak. And now living where I live, I didn't grow up in a rural environment, and now I live very rurally, in nature, you could say, but nature is everywhere. It's not just in rural places. I think that's another problem, that a lot of people think you have to go out to be in nature. You go to a nature reserve to be in nature, but nature doesn't exist in these little pockets. It's everywhere. And I know, I'm very privileged in the way that I can step out my door and it really is nature. But a lot of people say access to nature is restricted, and I understand that in certain areas. But at the same time, nature can be a dandelion springing up in a crack in the pavement. And I think that's this disconnect that I think it's a I don't know. Sarah, probably correct me on this more, because I have no kind of academic background in this, but if it's an epidemic or a pandemic, that this huge nature disconnect across most of the Western world. And now living in a rural area, I would definitely say if you're disconnected from it, which unfortunately I'd say 80% of the people living around me are, which is quite shocking considering where I live. But you see, everything is negative. When I speak to my neighbors and the people I live around, it's not, wow, that's amazing, those vultures flew over, or there's bears in that forest. It's, oh, those vultures kill our cows. They don't. That bear, like everything, it has negative connotations, and I think that disconnect, which has happened in the last 30 years or so, has meant there's a huge loss of compassion, I guess, and care for nature. And it's kind of going down a bit of a dark hole, but that's how I'm seeing it at the minute, unfortunately, here.
And really just echoing what Luke said, nature's always been a big part of my life, and that was only through my grandfather. My parents and my siblings have got no interest, and they still have no interest. So I was really fortunate to be put on that path by my granddad and have that passion instilled in me by him. I was in the Scouts from 5.5. I joined Beavers. I left when I was 23. So pretty much my whole entire life. I'm 27 now. So nature's been a very, very intrinsic part of my DNA. But as Luke was saying, I see it around me all the time. Lots of different examples. This morning I had a meeting working with a production company on a wildlife photography program, and the people doing the photography are desperate to photograph an endangered species, so they're going all the way to Borneo to do that. But I was working with endangered species right here in the UK last week, and I will hopefully be doing the same again tomorrow. The local cafe where I stop off sometimes and get a drink on my beach walk, in the exact same spot where I see the gannets, I have my binoculars. And one time she said, "Oh, what are you looking for today?" And I said, "Oh, I've just been watching some gannets." She said, "Oh, are they on the pond?" Because there's a pond behind the beach. And it's a shock to me every single time. The same when people say, "Oh, you're so lucky," if I'm going off on assignment or something. And as Luke says, it's because it's very lucky to be going to spend this time with puffins on an island, but if you just step outside the front door and look up, you can also see things. And like you said, even if it's a weed coming through a brick wall, there is nature everywhere, but it's trying to rewire how we look at it and appreciating what we've got around us at the same time. Sure, the desire to photograph an endangered species, you immediately think, right, endangered species, orangutan, rhino, you go big, you go far away, but you don't think puffin, badger here in the UK. And appreciating those tiny fleeting moments, even if it's just last night I was brushing my teeth and I thought, oh, the sky's glowing really orange, and I just took a moment to have a look. And it's those things. If you're having a cup of tea, stand outside and have it rather than sitting inside. It's just I think it almost seems simple for us that it's always been a part, and you go on your own journey of realizing that it's not so simple and straightforward. And there are plenty of people around us all the time that really don't even understand nature, and it's bridging that gap that's the important thing now.
Well, I'll definitely, before you guys leave, I'm definitely going to get your top tips on how people can through that.
Yeah.
But Sarah, why? I mean, we've touched on it, but what do you think are the reasons that there is this disconnect? You know, there's been studies, but also, you know, we see it. People just don't engage with it. They don't feel the way that we almost assume it should be natural that, you know, for years we're meant to sort of notice. Sort of evolutionary speaking, where, you know, we depended on nature. So what are the reasons do you think that this disconnection has appeared?
I mean, I could go quite deep on this, so I'll try and do some kind of summaries. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a long history of disconnection. So, you know, from being hunter-gatherers to settling on the land and kind of farming, which in some respects might have created some stronger relationships, but it started to shift our focus as far as, you know, being needing as a survival mechanism to really be in tune with everything that was happening around us. Science, religion, education, capitalism, you know, I mean, yeah, all of the isms, I would say, would come somewhere down that route. And effectively, like, more that, you know, we're living in a really hard, fast-paced, stressful world where actually surviving, you know, and meeting basic needs is very challenging. And we're living in a culture, particularly when you look at our kind of media, whether that's kind of films, whether it's social media, where we're distracted all of the time. And that's kind of one of our new survival mechanisms, actually, is just to distract ourselves from the reality of some of the things that we're facing. So I think there's lots and lots of reasons. But kind of going back to what Luke and Rachel were saying, I think actually there's also a real idea that actually we do need to connect in pristine places, that it is a place of kind of privilege being able to access nature. And of course, for wilderness and having gardens and things like that, that does kind of come from privilege. But actually, you know, we can, even if we're kind of based inside, you know, we can take moments, you know, looking out the window, watching the birds, watching the clouds move, you know, going out on, even on a high street. You know, I live near quite a kind of busy town, and actually even the kind of moments that I can connect with nature when I'm kind of like walking down a busy high street, there's just shops and concrete and tarmac and roads, you know, there's lots and lots of opportunities there. So it doesn't take so much to shift into connection, but actually people need to understand that it will benefit them. And I think that's one of the issues that we're facing, is that actually people have become so disconnected. Nature is seen as a resource for most people, first and foremost, that we can just keep using. And that, you know, we often talk about using nature, and even our language so creates disconnection. So actually for me, it's about helping everyone recognize that this is something that we can kind of come back to. Rachel said something about it being within her DNA. Like, this is what it means to be human, is to recognize that we are part of an ecosystem and we are a mammal. You know, we are an animal, and yeah, actually finding ways to kind of come back to that natural self of us is crucial, is what's absolutely what's needed, is what all the evidence points to. So the University of Derby, their Nature Connectedness research group, which obviously is how we've met David, is through that kind of network, shows that at least initially it is that kind of facilitated time for people, again, to help people know what to do when they're in nature. So it can be little steps, and these pathways really support people to connect in many different ways. And actually for us as facilitators, it's about also holding these spaces where people can share their stories of nature connection, and really kind of build in a community. So for us, when we look at nature connection, it's connection to self as nature, it's social connections, because we really need those, and it's connecting more widely to the natural world of which we belong.
Brilliant. And you've set this up nicely, yeah, talking about the University of Derby, because actually our whole campaign, and which is looking at the different pathways to nature connection, comes from their fantastic work to turn nature connection into something which is hard to describe, into something which is like a clear psychological construct, is measurable, and that, you know, we can actually see the differences between different people's sense of connection. But crucially, it's something that can be changed, and we've all talked about the ways that can happen. And so our campaign has picked up on these 5 pathways that the research group came up with, which are sort of routes to improve your your relationship with nature, as you say, Sarah, from one that's sort of from extraction or utility or just contact to one which is where you're actually part of nature. And this month, so the June is beauty. We're looking at the beauty pathway. July, we're looking at the senses pathway. August, the emotion pathway. September, meaning, and then finally compassion in October. We're going to be doing one of these sort of video podcasts each. But beauty is very visual, isn't it? So that's one of the reasons it makes a lot of sense to be speaking with wildlife photographers and filmmakers. And should we jump in a little bit, because you guys have actually provided some wonderful photos from some of your work. So Luke or Rachel, do you want to perhaps talk us through a couple of your images up here, anywhere there's a story? Because actually, I should explain as well, one of the themes, one of the challenges that we've set out for people is unexpected beauty as well. But yeah, it was Rachel, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about this, your photo here of the gannets, how it came about and why it's actually quite a nice example of unexpected beauty.
Yeah, of course. So this image is the current winner of Natural Artistry and Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and it features 2 northern gannets, which are the biggest seabird we have breeding around the UK with a 2-metre wingspan, billing and courting on a sandstone cliff in Shetland. But there's much more to it than that. So this was my very first visit to the location. I went out in a very small boat off the coast of Shetland, and as soon as we came around the corner, my sort of photographer's eyes saw a lot of potential in this location. The sandstone cliffs had been very easily eroded by big waves and strong winds that you get all around Shetland, and they'd created these very sculpture-like, soft, curved areas that the gannets were nesting around. And framing all of those lovely curves and the soft shapes were lots and lots of streaks of guano, which is essentially just gannet poo. And I loved the way that the poo was framing these shapes. I loved that it was holding everything together. And I knew that I really just wanted one pair of gannets to draw up their necks and to start billing, but to be framed around one of these. Now, there are roughly 22,000 pairs of northern gannets at this location, but finding the perfect pair, doing this behaviour for the few minutes that I was there was really difficult. And it was a very stormy day, and our skipper had to make the decision to turn around and head back to mainland Shetland because the swell was just getting too much. And I was absolutely gutted, because as a photographer, you see a moment in nature, or you imagine what it could be sometimes, and you have that taken away from you when you're so close. And just as the boat was turning around and pulling away, and I was moving backwards facing the boat, facing up against the cliffs, trying to grasp onto every last second, this pair, isolated on a lower ledge, drew up their bills and began courting. And it was a real magic moment in wildlife photography. And a lot of wildlife photography is having an understanding of your subject before you photograph it, putting yourself in the strongest possible position with prior research, prior knowledge. And if you can't do that in the field, you do that online. If you can't do that online, you read books. You put yourself in a strong position. You give yourself all of the tools and the resources. But it still doesn't manage the fact that you're asking uncontrollable factors to fall in your favor: the behavior and placement of a wild animal, the weather, the timetable of someone else's boat. And those are the real magic moments in nature, when everything comes together for a split second. This was 3 frames. Now, for context, my camera can take 20 frames per second, and this behavior was just 3 of those within 20 frames in a second. So they really are split seconds, and you have to be so aware of what's going on around of you to make the most of these things. But the sort of hidden beauty amongst this is this is a visibly healthy courting pair of gannets, but it was taken on the same day that I was documenting the avian influenza crisis for National Geographic, and on the ledges just beneath were many carcasses of gannets. In the water were plenty of floating gannets, which were being predated by healthy great skewers, who would then contract the disease and die a really slow and painful death. And I didn't have a lens wide enough to get that whole story in the picture, though I do have another image which I didn't share with you, but perhaps I should have, which has the whole life cycle of the gannet, during the avian flu on one cliff ledge. But this was the real beauty amongst that chaos. This was the sign of hope when everything around them was falling apart. And whether they survived or not, I don't know, but this was the real moment to cling on to for me and to find hope in the bleak situation.
I love that. Rachel, and that sort of sums things up quite beautifully, because like the beauty, in that moment, and what you captured is the hook, is the way in. And then for us to then learn more about that animal, including, some of the more negative bits. But it's noticing the beauty in the first place, which is the way in, and that's quite that is the route, is the pathway. What does you guys? What do you think about Rachel's image? Any other comments at all on? I mean, it's award winning, so you can't diss it.
But it is subjective, though. So.
No, it's absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, and like you say, just hearing that kind of background story, that pair, and then knowing that if you zoom out, there's so much more to tell. Is like you say, David. It's just a really good example of how a picture can tell so many words and help us kind of connect through to a deeper issue.
Yeah, and it's I like that, because unexpected beauty, framing from essentially bird poo, but still be beautiful.
That's what I was going to say. I think as well that as a photographer, but in terms of like textures, and yeah, bird poo, I think there's just beauty. I mean, for me, it goes back to like knowing a subject as well, but knowing a species, and a picture like that transports me to a seabird colony, and especially gannets, the noises, and that kind of, I guess, ammonia-y smell. Sea spray on your face, that kind of thing. Which
perfect.
I think if an image can do that for you, it's perfect.
Yeah,
that's made my day. Thank you.
Very evocative. Luke, let's take a look at one of yours, because you've almost got a couple which is almost completely a different angle on that idea of unexpected beauty. I'm gonna pick this one, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about where it was taken and what we're looking at.
Oh, I had the peregrine all prepared in my head. Okay.
Oh, we can go to peregrine. Let's go.
No. Don't worry.
All right, let's start here, and then we'll go peregrine afterwards.
Yeah. Well, so basically, I mean, during most of my mid-career, I guess, I was focused on urban wildlife and showcasing kind of what I said earlier about nature on our doorsteps. This very much not on our doorstep, because it was taken in Singapore. But I was always looking for stories of species that were kind of making cities their home despite human, I guess, encroachment. Singapore is quite a good example. It's kind of a green city, but there's a huge amount of species living within it, including these guys, these otters. And I don't know how many groups of otters they've got there now. But of course, like otters, you can show it to anyone. And apart from maybe the most cold-hearted fishermen, most people love otters, and see them, as this cute kind of cuddly creature. But these guys are running through I don't think it is a sewage outlet. I hope it's not a sewage outlet, because I was kind of laid in it. But like a storm drain. But obviously, it's not the most beautiful. You've got all the brown water, and then there's that plastic in the foreground as well. But the otters just kind of frolicking around. So it's just showcasing that how resilient, well, not all wildlife is resilient, but certain species can be very resilient and make their home in these kind of urban spaces. And it goes back, you don't have to, obviously, I went quite far because I was in Singapore, but if you lived in Singapore, you can go out your door and see otters. And even in the UK now, there are towns and cities. I've seen numerous otters in various towns and cities around the UK. If there's fish and a relatively healthy waterway, which is, well, I won't go into politics, but due to current sewage spillages, let's say, but a spillage would be a soft way of putting it. But yeah, healthy waterways, you can have otters thriving.
Yeah, there's apparently otters in the Usk, and the Usk is on its knees, essentially. So it's amazing how they're sort of resilient they are. And because you mentioned it as well, Luke, and teased it, tell us a bit more about this. This is my favourite. I know it's very obvious, but this is my favourite.
Yeah, I mean, peregrine falcons are kind of famous now, aren't they, for taking over cities around the globe? Taking over, that's the wrong term, but as in making their home there. And Chicago is one of those places. And this is Linda Perry, she was known as. She nested in a flower pot on this guy's balcony. So I spent 2 consecutive years with them, photographing and filming them, with Chicago as the background. And I mean, I hate cities. I live very far from a city now. I can't tell you the last time I was in a big city. But having that kind of species that kind of, they were extinct or locally extirpated in Illinois in the 60s due to DDT, like much of the kind of peregrine falcon and raptor population across the globe. And then they came back and they saw Chicago as a blank canvas. There was prey through feral pigeons, and it's actually on a migration flyway. And they saw the skyscrapers and the tower blocks as empty cliff faces with no one else nesting on them. So they moved in. And at the time of taking that photo, which was in 2017, probably, I think there was 22 pairs in Chicago alone, raising chicks. And again, going back to showing the resilience and these incredible, it's the fastest animal on earth living in the city. You can go to London, you can see them, pretty much most cities across the UK and towns now. Where I grew up, there's now a pair on the Abbey there. I still remember seeing my first peregrine falcon. I was probably about, 6 or 7 years old at Slimbridge Nature Reserve, and going up the rickety hide steps, and a guy saying, "Look through my scope," and seeing this peregrine falcon stood on a mud flat. And for me, that, like, now at 32 years old, I still remember that. I can close my eyes and picture that, despite spending many hours photographing them all over the place. So I think to have that link to the, Slimbridge it's a pretty wild place, but not very wild. But then seeing them in the city as well and just showcasing that, I think that for me, that's the thing, to show that most people live in cities, and we have really good wildlife in our cities if we make space for them. And that you can step outside your door and see a dandelion, but you also could look up and see a peregrine falcon.
Yeah, if you make space for them, and if you notice,
Yeah, and I think that's it. Noticing. I mean, I didn't put the picture in there. I mean, there's the coots on the nest. That was in Amsterdam. But I remember filming or being on a commission in London out the back of Paddington Station, lying on the towpath, photographing moorhen chicks just popping out underneath their mum on the nest. And like commuters stepping over me and probably being quite annoyed. But at the same time, some of them stopping and taking their headphones out and looking and being like, "Oh, I've walked back and forth here for the last 2 weeks and never noticed them." And I think that is it, this lack of connection and distraction, or not lack of distraction, too many distractions, but lack of connection and missing that. Yeah. And it definitely, I don't know if they had a crap day at work, but they left with a smile on their face after seeing this little cute duckling. Are moorhen chicks called ducklings? I don't know, but popping their head out underneath.
It doesn't take much, does it? It's just below the surface, that connection. And Sarah, maybe you can give us a sense of why beauty in particular, and noticing beauty. I mean, there's all sorts of interesting studies showing that, like, it's particularly people that notice beauty, that have that in nature, have that connection, appreciate beauty much more in natural things than man. There's plenty of beautiful man-made things, but it's like another level when it's nature that's the art. Why is it beauty in particular that sort of can be such a powerful connector to nature? And have you seen it? Have you seen it in the wild, literally, with people?
Yeah, I mean, I think partly because it's accessible. So I think nature connection exists, I think, for everyone when it comes to a sunset. When it came to the Northern Lights recently, when there's a particular kind of big spectacle, actually people that maybe aren't connected to nature in any other aspect of their life will stop and share that. So I think there's something around that kind of shared experience. There's something around our kind of visual sense and how dominant that is, and how then, we just, if we're paying attention, we notice things. And again, even from our brain point of view, like our neural pathways, when we see beauty, when we see things like repeating patterns in nature. So actually I've got a quote from Rachel Carson that I'd quite like to read at this point, actually, that I think speaks to this a bit. So there were two quotes, but one of them was, "Some of nature's most exquisite handiwork is on a miniature scale, as anyone knows who has applied a magnifying glass to a snowflake." I think there's so much that we miss, but again, it's really, really easy to connect people in. And I wondered, David, with the photos that are up, if I could just speak to one of the photos. Yeah, because I think that's a really good example of how these pathways actually work in principle.
It's one of the photos that you shared with us. So.
Yeah, it's any of the ones that have a frame around them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've got a couple actually.
Great. So yes,
how about these two?
Yeah, those two, perfect. So so this is a really good example. So we work at a really beautiful little woodlands in Cornwall. And we have a 6-week program is our kind of key project, and we follow a pathway per session. And this is the activity that we have done over and over again with participants, where we invite them to go for a mindful wander. They will have already had a nature-based grounding, so they'll already have kind of really dropped in. And we will have kind of created a welcoming, inclusive container for people to, feel safe and to feel like they're ready to kind of explore. And then what we do is we invite people to go off for a wander with a picture frame, and with a little hand magnifier. And then we invite people to just walk around and see what catches their attention, and frame things and see what they notice in the frame. And then at a set point, we basically ask them to leave their frame, to then spend a bit of time exploring what's within the frame with a magnifier, so they can really, really notice those smaller details. And then what we do, which I think is really crucial, is we then have this nature gallery. So then we walk around and we visit each person's frame, and we ask them what it was that they were drawn to, what it was that they noticed. And that's always beautiful, because particularly there'll be tiny details that when we're all standing as a group looking at the frame, we won't notice them. So it really enables us to kind of notice the layers, notice the kind of the ecosystems that are happening within that frame. And actually what's beautiful, which we didn't necessarily expect, is that when it comes to the reflections, actually they tend to end up incorporating all of the pathways. Once we've visited the gallery, people will have come, their compassion will have shown up, meaning, emotion, beauty, and the contact senses, and the senses, sorry. And this is quite simple, but it's so impactful. And what we find is, even for one-off sessions, where we did a staff session last week, where there are a couple of people that are a bit skeptical actually about what they were doing with us in the woods. And they kind of shared at the beginning, I'm outdoors all the time, I'm walking my dog. I knew that they weren't really into it. And their last checkout basically was them sharing, I kind of was cynical at the beginning. I didn't know what to expect. I kind of thought that I'm connected to nature already. And actually what I've realised is actually I wasn't very connected. And that activity in particular, the frames activity, really, really helped kind of just create those connections and help people realise how much when they're in those natural spaces, they're not paying attention. So yeah, just really, really love that as an activity.
That literal, because sometimes you're in nature and it's almost a lot to take in, isn't it? Especially if you're not used to it. But just bringing it down, that framing it like that, and is great. Does that resonate at all, Luke, and with Rachel? With, I don't know how you approach things, because I was just doing that, and that makes you think of a photographer, doesn't it? Are you sort of going through a similar process when you're out and about?
In certain.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go, Luke. First, you go.
You go for it.
No, I was just going to say, I suppose maybe at the start, but I think you see it anyway. You see the compositions, you see the potential, and I don't know, I can only speak on behalf of myself, but like I explained with that picture of the gannets on the cliffs, it was the first time I'd ever laid eyes on it, and as soon as our boat came around the corner and I saw it, like I saw it, I saw the potential. But yeah, it's true, you do kind of frame up, and something that I really enjoy doing in my workshops is just getting people to look at it differently, and not even in an abstract way, but just to get down low and include some sea campion in their picture, or to be eye level with your subject, or try looking down at it. I think it's breaking that barrier of standing bolt upright in a natural environment and looking at everything from 5'7" or something, and then actually putting yourself in the environment a bit more, crouching down, trying different angles, all of those things.
That's great. Yeah, I guess part of noticing is looking differently, isn't it? Does that resonate at all with you, Luke? Is this idea of framing, and as Rachel said, sort of getting different angles?
For me, I think it's hard as a photographer now, because it's become ingrained. Like, I'll be driving along and I'll see a picture or something. It's the frame is there, and it also can be quite annoying. I think most wildlife photographers probably have this with certain things, that you're also not just seeing framing, but envisioning framing and the perfect picture when you're working on a particular subject. So you're building up, this is the shot I need.
Yeah.
So you're looking for that shot all the time, or you see the natural frame without the subject in it.
Okay.
And I'd probably, off the top of my head, it's only happened to me twice where I've seen that without the subject in it, thinking, if only that was there, and then it's actually happened. It happened to me with a leopard cub, and it happened to me with an Iberian lynx. And that's in how many years of my life doing this, that actual frame, seeing the shot without the subject, and then all the stars aligned, and said creature went in tree and sat on said rock in the habitat.
How did that feel? How do those moments feel?
Oh, like winning the lottery.
I bet.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the lynx one actually did do really well in competitions as well, and it's still like my favorite lynx picture. And it's not all about competitions, but it's just quite funny that I'd always wanted this. I'd seen this. I'd been to this one place so many times and thought, I'd said to my wife even, like, imagine if a lynx sat on that rock, it'd just be perfect. And
I'm gonna
doing that.
I'm gonna try that. Manifesting.
Yeah.
Who knows how the universe works.
Exactly.
That's great. I think what would be, well, it's funny because Sarah, you're working with most of us are sort of, there's a scale, photographers are here in terms of being able to see it, notice it, and see those things, imagine the picture and the beauty in it. But most of us are sort of working down here, aren't they? And that's why those sort of tips, those exercises are so useful. Would you guys be okay if we had a look at some of the entries that we've had to our photo challenge that we've had this month? And you can give us some of your feedback, and then perhaps we can finish with a few more tips, both photography tips and, Sarah, any other sort of exercises or activities people can do to activate that beauty pathway. And also the other pathways, that linked photo, for example, Luke, that's an example of how something can have a lot of meaning for you personally. It might not have been everyone's favorite, but for you, it really means something. It's connected with the moment and feeling.
For sure.
But yes, is that all right? I'll explain what the competition was all about. So each month, as part of the campaign, we have set a challenge, and we didn't want to call it a competition because we didn't think Nature Connection should be about competition. So it was a challenge, and we really wanted to encourage people to notice and look closely, and we didn't want to make it just a standard, take a beautiful picture. So we asked people to send us in photos of unexpected beauty, something that would normally be disgusting or scary, or you wouldn't even notice. And it's only halfway through, but we've had some nice submissions so far. So we can take a look at them. You guys can tell us what you think. Shall I just pick one, or is there any that's caught your eye that we should take a look at?
I want to see that, like the one next to
my eye.
Which one, sorry?
The beetle.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay, right. What do you think?
I just think that's a really nice perspective of a beetle, because you're looking up at it and it's like the beetle in his kingdom rather than an insect on the floor. It's really nice. So I don't think anyone, I'm not very involved in the insect world of photography or macro photography at all, so it's sort of quite fresh for my eyes, but I really like that. I think it's nice. It looks like something out of Bug's Life, out of a Pixar, rather than the real world. That's really cool.
Okay,
I think it's cool because in small it looked like, I thought it was a red deer or something. I don't know if it is taken.
It looks like it had antlers.
It's and now it's like the tiny, minuscule, but actually in that landscape.
It's nice.
Imagine noticing that when you're walking past. That you're really connected when you're seeing that.
Yeah, I'm not too hot on beetles, but I think that's the type of oil beetle which we do get.
I think it is, with
UK,
it's those ones that squirt. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that submission. That's already got a. Let's take a look at some others. Any, Sarah? Any that caught your eye on our gallery here?
Yeah, I really want to see the one between the foxglove and the bee, or bee hornet.
Yeah. So this was sent in by Ian. I'm not quite sure. It looks. What do you guys think?
It's a leaf.
Yeah, it's a leaf.
It's a leaf, but I thought it was like a super close up of like a butterfly's wing or something. But yeah,
I think it's a diseased leaf as well, which is interesting because it sort of changes your. For us, disease is, horrid, but for the actual virus or bacteria or parasite that caused it, it's a sort of a beautiful existence, maybe.
I think mold. Like if you look at mold, Obviously, I don't know if that is a type of mold on there as well, but mold is incredible. I mean, everyone goes nuts about fungi and stuff, and basically mold is that in a down form. But yeah, like you say, disease, cells, everything. It's kind of, when you look at the intricacies of them.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And there's something, sorry, just with that one, David,
No,
just
carry on.
actually, you know, that kind of decaying leaf, like we try and run our sessions throughout the year. And in the winter, people can feel like that's a really difficult time to connect to nature because they're just thinking, well, there's nothing around. And actually often like looking at a leaf like that, like the colours, you know, the textures, I'd imagine, you know, if you had a kind of wider view that leaf might be amongst loads of other leaves that are at different stages of decomposition. And again, it's just such a beautiful example of just paying attention and noticing the unexpected. Yeah, really lush.
Yeah, that's good. Noticing the unexpected and noticing the diversity. You know, it's so easy to walk past and think, "Oh, that's just grass," or "That's just trees," and then you actually realise it's 5 different types of trees, grass, and even within that one species, like I say, stages. Yeah. All right. Should we take? Anyone want to pick out another one to? Ideally, one that you like the look of.
What is the hornet one? Is it a hornet? I think
it's a paper wasp.
A paper wasp, yeah.
Yeah,
Those little
I can't even sent that one.
Cool.
But
I think it's one of those things that, yeah, I mean, I've said it again and again this whole podcast about beauty in nature. I mean, it really upsets me. And it was actually Rebecca Hoskin who kind of termed she didn't upset me. She termed the phrase agri-wilding, but she's spoken and written about it a lot, about wording and, you know, weed, pest, and all these kind of things. And us as people, again, going into nature, but we are part of nature. And I think it was a podcast she did, and she used to be a wildlife camera woman, and she traveled the world and spoke to lots of indigenous people and asked what their word for wild or nature was. And they didn't have one, because it was just like, it's what they lived in, right? And we as people are part of nature. And then it's the same with pest. It all has these negative connotations, and weed. But actually weeds are plants, and, you know, most weeds are actually very beneficial to a lot of species, and most pests do an important job. Okay, a hornet or a wasp might sting us, but it's not out to get us, even though it feels like that when you're having your alfresco dinner, perhaps. But yeah, so I think that's, you know, pictures like that showing off the beauty of the, you know, look at that, it's an insane looking creature,
and that's that structure is its home. Well, it's nest, I guess, for whatever. That it's created itself. You know, shape.
Yeah, like amazing architects. I'm trying to build my own house outside here, and it doesn't look anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about noticing these things is once you start noticing the beauty, then you can actually notice functionality, the problem solving. You know, biomimicry is so much potential. Nature's solved most problems that exist. You just need to notice and work out how it's done it. You know, I'm sure there's all sorts of clever things structurally. It's an excellent example. Yeah. All right, should we do one more? Is there Rachel, anyone you want to take a look at and caught your eye?
I did like the first one when you put the images up a little while ago. And I'm not quite sure what to comment, but it's just one of those things that draws your eye to it. And I don't always feel like it's necessary to give a reason to why you really like something. Sometimes your eyes just go. But I just liked the whole placement of it. I love the real vibrant colours and just all of the structure in a leaf again, I imagine. It's just very nice.
That's nice.
There's just a lot to look at.
Yeah, I quite like that as well. You don't need to explain. In fact, I don't know, Sarah, is that something that people always trying to sort of use their head, if you like, too much, when it should just be about your heart? Sometimes I know it's a bit cheesy.
No, be cheesy. I mean, I think at least initially, like I say, I think there is something about that kind of story catching, and actually kind of creating curiosity and following people's curiosity. So I would say that people I've worked with over a long period of time that have maybe been coming to different sessions, actually, one of the things they really appreciate is that when they have an experience in nature, whatever that might be, that there's people that want to hear that story, and not just want to hear it, want to get excited about it, want to ask really good questions, want to help them create more of a connection to that experience. Yeah, I think that's really, really crucial. And it's something, again, you know, it's something that we've lost in our culture, really, as far as sharing stories with each other. Yeah, I think it's a really crucial part of actually talking about nature. You know, I've been saying recently, imagine if instead of our kind of British way of saying, hi, how are you doing? And that kind of two-way thing that often isn't even very real. Actually, what if we shifted our conversations to say, what have you noticed in nature today? And what a different start that would be, and where would our conversations go if we were doing that?
Wow, that's lovely. Okay, homework for everyone.
I might start doing that.
Yeah.
I might get like completely ostracized from my local village, but
you can come back and chat to all of us and we'll catch your stories.
Yeah.
Guys, this has been great. Thanks so much for taking a look at those submissions. As I said, there's still time. For I think we're going to take Rachel. I think you and another photographer we work with, Tamara, are kind of going to pick some of your favourites of our submissions.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
And we'll put them together in a gallery once at the end of this month, once it's finished. So if people have got time to submit, and actually, what would be great is Luke and Rachel maybe to get some tips from you on those that are still to take their unexpected beauty and nature images. Get some. Have you got any sort of pearls of wisdom on how people can go out and get those interesting angles, and then also take the photos themselves? Rachel, we'll start with you, and then Luke.
Yeah, I suppose putting yourself where you'd like to put the camera. You know, like I said before, don't just stand up and take a picture. The results are never normally that good. Get yourself really stuck in, kneel down, lay down, look upside down, just think slightly differently. You know, sort of more of a tip, just understanding the behavior and, you know, keeping that accessible, even if it's just visiting the same spot 3 times that week, seeing how it changes, seeing how if earlier in the morning the light makes it look nicer than it does on your normal afternoon walk, just mixing things up. And I think just trying to experience things differently. If I think some people get into a bit of a routine with nature and they go on the dog walk in the evening and they see everything in the evening, but there's a whole other world that exists in the morning and mid-afternoon. And it's just nice all of my photography is purely from the heart. I only photograph things I'm interested in, and that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in nature as a whole, but because my photography is so heavily guided by this deep-rooted passion, I see things that other people don't see, whether it's just the feather on the back of a stag which has got tiny little droplets of water on. You know, people will look at it and say, oh, that's a nice bird, but I look at it from my heart and I'm like, oh wow, look at that, look at the droplets, look at how the light catches in its eye. It's different things. So I think really photography can be done by anyone, but it's honing in on what it is that makes you tick and what excites you when you take the photograph. And if you lead with that, the rest usually does follow, because you enjoy doing it so much, you put yourself out there so much more, and you lock into the world so much more.
That's brilliant. I love that, Rachel, sort of starting with the interest, starting with the appreciation, and then sort of getting the image. That's brilliant. Luke, any other tips or things you'd like to add on how people can...
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered quite a lot of it in terms of that timing, but also I basically everything that was in my head we've said, so I guess that's why it's in my head. But in terms of like, don't go looking for something really rare. Just get out there and see what's right in front of you, and sometimes the thing that's right in front of you that you see the most might make the best image. You know, if it's gulls at your local duck pond or whatever, that kind of thing. Don't just surprise yourself, but and like Rachel said, like, see what you're drawn to. And whatever you do, don't put loads of pressure on yourself, because that's when I feel you don't enjoy it. Just see what comes to you, and also just go and just sit somewhere and see what comes to you that way. I mean, sometimes I mean, in all honesty, what Rachel just said is really like rings true to me, because I mean, people that follow my work and stuff will know over the last kind of 5 years, my work's gone rubbish. I've gone very quiet, and that's because I fell out of love with photography in what I was doing, because it became so much part of my job and the pressure that was involved in it. And now I'm literally as in like the last 6 weeks, I've picked up a camera for the first time in kind of a year nearly, and I'm taking pictures again, and I'm enjoying it. But, you know, I've got 2 kids and a big rewilding project to work on, and my passion comes from nature and being in that. But like from doing it as a job and then it coming a hobby again, it's quite nice, you know, not having that pressure. And I just sit in the field with my camera, or go for a walk with my camera and see what crosses my path. And that's how I started when I was 12 years old. So it's quite nice 20 years later to have that. Yeah, full circle.
Yeah, there's something quite smug almost about actually not taking a photo. Do you know what I mean? Some of the best photos.
Yeah.
In here.
No, I mean, for sure. Like, even when I'm guiding, I mean, to be honest, when I'm doing photographic guiding, or have been in the past, 'cause I'm not doing much at the minute, I have a camera, and people say, why are you not taking a picture? I say, well, one, because you're the client, but two, I like looking at things. Yeah.
And Sarah, perhaps you can finish off. Obviously, we focused on photography. It's a wonderful means of noticing and celebrating beauty, but not everyone has a camera. Not everyone even has access to nature. Is there any sort of tips you might be able to give people sort of aren't photo based on how they can start to notice beauty and connect back to nature?
Yeah, thank you. Well, actually, Rachel and Luke both kind of mentioned one of the things that I would really recommend, which is developing something called a sit spot or a secret spot, but basically somewhere that you really build relationship to. So the kind of optimum is that you visit this same place every single day. The kind of key criteria isn't that it's a kind of pristine wilderness. It's actually that it's no more than 5 minutes from home, so that life doesn't get in the way and you visit as regularly as you can. And when you're there, just spending time. So as I said, it's like an optimum 20 minutes every day. But then it's also whatever is realistic in your life. And you just spend time there regularly through the seasons. And over a 12-month period, you really build a relationship. And actually, you start noticing these kind of subtle shifts. And that space actually develops a relationship to you as well. You know, we often, have those experiences with the robin, blackbird, where, we get to know them and they're aware of us. So actually it kind of really helps us build this reciprocal relationship, and it really supports our well-being. So the other thing I would say is, for those people that maybe would feel unsure of what to do and how to connect to nature when they're there, to find out what's happening in their local area, because across the UK there are facilitators like myself offering nature-based well-being, basically to support a whole range of holistic health needs, and to support people to feel less isolated. So yeah, I would really invite people to get in touch with local health providers and find out what's happening in the area, or get in touch with me and I can help people link up to what's going on.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, that's great, because it can be hard. You can do a lot on your own, but sometimes with the help of a facilitator and other support, it can unlock this sort of magic of nature connection. And I would be it would be remiss of me to not plug our own campaign and website, which I'm just going to do before we finish. And for more ideas on how to connect with nature, especially around beauty this month, please do visit ReWild Yourself /time and see, which will take you to the It's Time to ReWild Yourself homepage. And we've got lots of resources, including some more tips actually from Rachel, lots more. And then we'll be having resources related to each of those different parts each month. So do keep coming back. Check out ReWild Yourself on Instagram. And if people want to find more of your work, guys, is there anywhere that we should point them towards?
I'm at Wild Finca, and that's not just because I can't pronounce my THs. It's not Finca, it's farm in Spanish on Instagram.
Nice.
And wildfinca.com.
And
Yeah.
Rachel,
and
I'm sorry,
RachelBigsby.com, online at Rachel Bigsby on Instagram and on YouTube.
And natureconnects.org, Nature Connects Cornwall on Facebook.
Brilliant. Hey guys, thanks so much. That's been really great and interesting, and hopefully people watching at home have got some ideas on how they can improve their relationship with nature. Anything else anyone wants to sort of finally sign off with?
Leave your phone behind when you go.
Turn your phone off right now. Go out.
All that. Yeah.
All right. That sounds like a good place to end it. All right. Thanks ever so much, guys.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you.
Okay.